There's actual companies, like building companies, that will allow you to buy houses legit, green, own them outright. I think they call it green title, using Bitcoin, coins, Ethereum, all the different crypto markets. So you just negotiate on the rate and you change it, you tap your phone with this company and off you go. You're co-owner of a house using digital currency. So it's already happening. I think what's going to happen, a lot of these court cases aren't so much to regulate it, it's to give the government time to catch up, because they're not trying to restrict what's happening. They've been grabbed by the throat and dragged along with this, and they're trying to reduce how much embarrassment they're getting by how much the crypto market's actually flogging their asses in this.
Welcome to The Greater Wealth. I'm Derek Whitaker, and we've got some special guests joining us today with The Greater Wealth. We've got Kimberly Calhoun from the United States joining us. Great to have her. We've got Shaquille Latimer. Shaquille is global. He lives everywhere. He's one of these, what do we call, traveling businessmen, you might say, on the global fronts, international. And we've got Travis Carter from Western Australia, who joins us once again. Today we've got three topics that we're going to be looking at. We're going to kick it off with the West Australian housing sort of situation. The second thing we want to look at is what's been happening in the crypto world space, some big movements happening last year, and a unique confession from a whistleblower who formerly was involved with the World Economic Forum. We're going to reveal all of that a little bit later in the program. To kick it off today, Australia has had 500,000 immigrants come to our country, and guess what? It doesn't have enough places to house them. Rental prices have gone right through the roof. And of course, we've got, with that going on, interest rates being hiked up at the central banks of the Reserve Bank of Australia. We've also got the situation where building companies have been suffering and not able to sustain, with many of them folding. And this in Australia is important for its internal economy because it's very dependent on the real estate sector. What's interesting about this, and I bring it up with an international group here, guys, is that we're seeing this problem happen globally. The United States has got a problem with over 1 million people coming across its border due to the administration of the Democrats not securing its borders. We've got situations in England where people have been crossing the channel in their throes, and we're not talking about refugees necessarily. The reports coming out have been that they've been men on fighting age. We've seen this happen in Ireland as well, and other various parts of Europe, such as Italy. And we want to bring this attention to you because it's affecting people who are local, can't get housing, rent's gone through the roof, and of course affordability has gone skyrocketing with, of course, the double-edged sword of inflation and interest rates happening. So, Kimberly, we'll start with you. Are you noticing a pattern in the United States as well? How hard is it hitting everyday Americans?
Oh, absolutely, Derek. It's hitting us really hard, especially for the young people who are graduating from college. They're unable to even rent a house right now. Many of the young people are having to move back home to kind of get started again, work a couple of jobs. But the interest rates are going astronomically high, hitting 9 to 10% just for a mortgage right now, which is very hard on the middle class, who generally sometimes have to move around or refi their mortgage every once in a while to do other things. That it's just going to kill their means to live and live comfortably or even retire. Travis always uses the word forever home, and I love that term. That there is no means to obtain a forever home right now.
I find it interesting too, in light of what happened in 2007 and 8 with the global financial crisis, and you had a unique situation in the United States where housing prices imploded and you get them cheaper from what you could actually build them once those prices crashed. Is there anticipation right now that could reoccur?
Can I just jump in, because I have to go. I'm obviously out at lunch right at the second. I'll just say a couple of things. We've had interest rates really too low for a very, very long period of time. And if people think about before COVID, one of the complaints was that older people who were relying very much on interest rates in order to fund their retirements were really being screwed over by having these really, really low interest rates. And of course, after the GFC, when those rates dropped, people started to panic about where they were going to put their money and not wanting to take on too much risk. So there is a difference between, there is a difference between young people who need to have access to cheap credit and older people who actually need to have a safe return on their money. And that's going to be a problem. Now, yes, interest rates are going up. Why? Because they've got no other way of crushing demand. They don't want to be honest about it, but they need the unemployment rate to go higher in order to bring inflation down. People talk about cost of living and especially housing affordability. But you have to remember that if they do actually release extra land and give building permits and actually allow those extra homes to be built, that will take away the upward pressure on property prices. And if you're a property investor, that's really bad for you. And many of the older people in Western society are relying on those higher prices. So I don't think it's just as simple as this. I think the government needs to look at ways to help, or even possibly, I don't normally say things like this, but even possibly subsidise home ownership for people when they're buying their first home or their only home. And you know, that may come at some cost to investors, especially international investors, into the property market. I don't think that what we should be doing, though, is making the property market more difficult for everybody in order to try to help those that are struggling to get in. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think politicians need to be honest with people and explain to people why other parts of the community may not necessarily support, for example, low property prices. It's not because people are evil or that there's some part of society which is just, you know, capitalistic, parasitic people feeding off the blood of the young. It's often because people are at just different stages of life. They're in different parts of their, of their investment cycle. And we just need to find a solution which helps everybody to get ahead rather than just pitting one group against another.
Shaquille, it's interesting you say that because I think the Australian market is very different from the United States market. I certainly have been a big believer in Australia in terms of we have so much focus on our capital cities in Australia, and yet where land control release is ridiculous here. I mean, I personally believe our prices here are so overpriced, overvalued in Australia. And I've been a big advocate of why can't we develop capital cities or other larger cities within the states we have? I mean, Western Australia alone, if it's seceded from the rest of Australia, would be the 8th or 9th largest nation in the world just in land mass. So there's certainly been a control of land in that respect. That way, it could probably ease pressure off the big capital cities, have less fluctuation in price markets in that way. I don't know that kind of solution would work in places like the United States where you have millions of people spread all over 50 states.
Well, you obviously I've rubbed off on you. You've gone from being a conservative to being a free market libertarian like me. But let's take your home state of California, Derek. You know, would the Democrats, they get criticised a lot because of how much bureaucracy there is in building new homes and city buildings and all that sort of stuff. So people like yourself and me and Travis, no doubt, will say what they should do is just get rid of some of the bureaucratic red tape. Of course, so that's what we want, right? We want government out of the way. But the downside of that is if you already have property in California and they get rid of the red tape, it's going to mean that your property isn't going to go up in value as much because the scarcity and the difficulty isn't there. And so there is a lot of people who actually benefit from the existing government structure and government bureaucracy. And just really case in point, if I can go back to George Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton. So George Bush Sr. came out and said, read my lips, no new taxes, and then immediately put taxes on. One of the things that they were trying to do at the time was to stop the Democrats and Republicans from increasing taxes under Bill Clinton. So what they had agreed to do was to get rid of or to reduce some of the taxes and in return get rid of some of the tax deductions and some of the tax benefits. And Republicans who ordinarily would have supported that opposed it because what they were afraid of is that they would end up getting rid of the benefits and then you would see tax creep upwards, but the tax deductions be removed. And so you actually, if the Republicans hadn't have changed this, what you would have seen is people who would ordinarily support small government end up trying to lobby Bill Clinton because he was going to bring in their deductions and all that. So I think that that's something you got to factor in, is that there is so many people out there when you scratch your head and go, I don't understand why anybody would vote for big government when big government are trying to trans the kids and big government are trying to do all this woke stuff, right? That's not what people are generally voting on. I mean, the referendum just showed us that. That's not normally what people are voting on. But there's often other issues in play where government regulations, you may not like them, but now that you've overcome them and you're in business or you're in a particular position, if you get rid of them, it weakens the position you're in. And look, what the solution is to that, I don't know. But I think that that's what we need to be talking about in government, as opposed to just whinging that government's too big or too small.
If we don't do something, though, what the danger might be is that kids can only get into their own home if they inherit it from mum and dad. Now, if mum and dad don't have a home, then that's a problem as well. But that's the path that seems to be travelling down.
Sure, but if you have a look at what both Canada, New Zealand has done, and now we're talking about doing it in Australia, which is to curtail or limit foreign investment into our countries in relation to real estate. Or Jacinda Ardern, who said, look, the property market is too high, we need to cool the property market. Well, another way of saying cool the property market is we want prices to either go down or not to go up by as much as they otherwise would have. That doesn't make sense to do that across the entire inventory of property in a country. Mm-hmm. If what you want to do is to help young people and young families get into their first home or get into their only home, then make sure that the family home has a tax subsidy on it. For example, in the United States, your mortgage payments and all that sort of stuff are tax deductible. Let people have that. Give them a direct subsidy to let people in the country, citizens of your country, own their own home, and investment properties just aren't subject to the subsidy. That's a way of doing it, which it's not ideal, but surely that would be preferable to injuring the value of the entire inventory of property across the country.
And there'd be a simple way to do that in terms of fringe benefits tax. You just apportion a portion of your salary to the mortgage payments, and that component could be tax-free. We kind of have that infrastructure already in place. I think it's a great idea.
There's also
I've got a beautiful plate of oysters in front of me, guys. So I'm going to love you and leave you. Sorry, Travis, if you want to say something, and then I'm going to leave you guys.
Okay, so what I was going to say, I love what Shaq is saying about protecting the family home side of things, but there's also other ways to do this, especially in WA. We have such an emphasis on the capital cities and people always want to live next to the CBD. I think what we need to also start doing is looking at those, making it geographically. So if you're trying to buy your family home in the Perth CBD, you don't get deductions. If you want to move out of the city, then you start getting the deductions, because at the moment, I know compared to places like LA and all that, our population density is really, really low, but all the industry is focused in Australia in the CBD. There's nothing outside of it. Prime example is the Fremantle Harbour. They want to relocate that to Kwinana. So this is our major transport hub on the ocean into Perth. It shouldn't be coming into Perth. It should be going to either Bunbury or Geraldton, which are a good 2 to 4 hours out of the city, and then we should be training it in. There's no jobs. Well, I shouldn't say there's no jobs. There are jobs in the regional areas, but there's so much of a focus on the city. So let's start subsidising houses in the remote areas. So that way people are starting to move out of the city. They move into these regional centres so they can start promoting the growth there, and then you start getting those satellite cities as well. We need to start expanding out where we focus our populations.
Travis, I don't think a government subsidy in relation to helping somebody to go into their own home should come with conditions where the government gets to encourage people to live in one area or another. Let people choose where they're going to live. If you're going to give them the subsidy, give them the subsidy, but don't tell them where they can and can't live because you think that they would be better off. You know what I mean? I think if you want to support, what you're saying makes sense. If you want to support this going up to these other areas instead of Fremantle, fine. Let government do that separately. But in relation to helping people getting into their own home, I don't think that it should be, well, we'll help you to get into your own home with a government subsidy if and only if you decide to live in this place, or as long as you don't live in this other place. I don't think I want government to have that sort of a say in the first place.
Yep. So there's a system at the moment called shared equity scheme in WA, where the government actually purchases a part of your house. They're already saying, right, you can have this suburb, this suburb, this suburb, this suburb, but nothing else.
Yeah,
that's already in place, but I think they need to have more of a focus with that. Instead of picking down to the suburb, I think it should be into the region.
I don't think that they should be doing that with the shared equity scheme. And I don't.
Absolutely. I think it's stupid.
Well, most things the government do are stupid. On that note, I'm going to leave you guys.
Enjoy your ocean boogers, Shaq.
Thank you, Shaq. I think what I recognise is that in property, there are two big strings that are pulled, and that's one is jobs. People want to be near their place of employment, particularly if it's reliant not just online, but a physical bricks and mortar type business. The second thing is family. Those two factors too, like you've got an aging parent that you need to be around looking after, or of course you've got an empty nest and you want to be near your kids and enjoy the grandchildren. Those two things, emotional ties, especially as people get older, the community around them they're familiar with, their friends and family, are the big deciding factors in terms of where they live. I don't like that idea in terms of the subsidy of a government doing this. I've seen this play out in one of my friends who, yes, there was a government body that helped them get into their first home, but now they have to share the capital gains on their property, right? They want to buy them out. And now they've got to face a situation where, oh boy, what do we do to get them off our home and off the title so that we can control the property 100% completely? So there are some flaws to that system.
Personally, I think your superannuation should be allowed to pay off your family home mortgage as well. That's something else I think would be a very big. I don't know if Kim, in America, do you have superannuation?
It's a retirement fund.
A retirement fund. So they take a percentage of your income and put it aside, and you can't touch it till you're like 65 or 90 or whatever.
And they call it the 401k.
I preach to do different, but we've got money that we can put aside. We can't touch it until we're 70 now or something like that, and or you're severely punished for doing it. But I try to teach put aside X amount while you're young into other diversified funds and let your portfolio build up, and then just let the interest pay you. Which Shaq is right. When the interest rates go up on the housing markets like that, my money goes up as well. So, but that's not what I'm about. I'm about sustainability for everyone, not just, the rich or myself in middle class. I'm fortunate. I'm still in middle class, that our divide has really grown in the past three or 4 years. That divide has the window is really big now. But I think that, being able to shift things and I want to keep it out of the government's hand, right? I want to keep my money out of the government's hand. I want to keep my house out of the government's. And I think that having a good pension, if you can get that, is good. But companies don't do that anymore either. But, just invest now. Nobody told me when I was younger. I didn't do it until I was around 30. But what I learned from that was if I just sacrificed a little bit of, my fun and stuff like that and just put the money aside, later I didn't need the government money. I didn't need, I didn't need to worry about waiting till I'm 70 to use certain funds. They use that a lot. But if you need to use it at 60, you can't.
One thing, it hasn't sat well because Shaq's raised that point before about the capital gains on property, especially because my wife and I, between the two of us, we actually own 3 houses. Two of them, our 2 investment properties up in Geraldton, we nearly own outright. So when we purchased the houses, we intentionally went into the purchase with enough of a deposit that our mortgage repayments were less than our rental returns, including maintenance, repairs, and all that sort of stuff. So in Australia, we call it a positively geared home. Our investment strategy was never to take capital gains into account because that can be the capital gains on a property is so tied in with government regulations, and I've got no faith in the government. So Shaq said, why should people who are buying property for the capital gains? Why should the government target them? Like, they shouldn't be doing that. So there's people that are going to lose because of that. But then you have a look at options and trading and share markets and all that sort of stuff. You can use the same analogy. Why should the government be taking into account the shareholders when they can release policies, especially oil and gas companies, electric companies, all those different things. So that's just one of the risks with investments. You've got to take what the government does with a pinch of salt. You've got to plan that, hey, one day the government might turn around, put a cap on how much a house can go up in value. So should you then be taking the capital gains into account when you're going into purchasing a residential property?
You should look into the future a little bit. Yeah. I think you need to take into, I mean, Derek might have a different input on this, but yes, absolutely. I mean, you need to plan for that just as much as, because you don't know what they're going to do. And, there are a lot of things that have changed on me that didn't even exist, 10 or 15 years ago when I decided, I got to start saving more. And they shift gears on us. And then I look at my portfolio and go, oh my God, thank God I got a financial advisor and let's redo all of this. So, you don't know what they're going to do. I mean, we're not going to have Social Security in 10 years. That's something that people have been paying in. And it's just the way they're spending our money and throwing it away. And so many people rely on it and are counting on it. It's not going to exist in 10 years. So build your portfolio not to count on the government and expect them to tax the heck out of you later. Just added an additional 10% of oops. That's what I say.
Oh, I love that term, oops. Because the other thing as well, so let's say the government does turn around and put a cap on how much capital gains, capital with that property can go up. How many investors, just have to think about it this way, how many investors are going to go, you know what, I'm not going to get the capital gains in this property anymore. There's no point leaving my money in that house. I'm going to sell it. So all of a sudden, the market, not only is it being capped by how much will go up, the market's going to get flooded with houses. The demand is higher, so the prices aren't going down. So if you're a savvy investor, you can sit there and you wait for that mini crash, jump in cheap, and then when it bounces back, all of a sudden, you've still got that capital gains there. So I think Shaq's probably don't have a different opinion on this one, but protecting capital gains is just a risk of the property market. If that's the way the government goes, that's the way the government goes. But I think, like with options trading, you need that volatility there to make it worthwhile, or you just change your investment strategy. And I think that's what people have to be prepared to handle.
I think you're right. You're going to lose value and you're going to lose investors. You're going to lose interest. I think just kind of leaves that stuff alone and let a few things happen naturally. What's happening right now is not good, though. Things have gotten a little out of hand. I don't know how they're going to get control of it. Cost of living has just gone astronomically out of range. And what caused it? Gas. Well, why did gas go up? I'll tell you why. It wasn't because of shortage. But, people really sit and think about, because, they try to use that. The news played with that. But I sat in those meetings, okay? And one of the first questions I asked was, do we have a shortage? And the guy just laughed and he goes, why would you think that? We had, 2.5, 3 years, nobody using gas and we're still pumping. COVID, nobody used gas, right? So we had a lot of gas, and what they were doing was just, it's all stored and ready to sell. And then the investors and the executives decided we want a bonus. And so they just jacked the price up, and they can because gas is not regulated. Now, if you want to put a cap on something, regulate gas. To me, it's a utility. I don't care what anyone says. We use gas to get to and from work. We use gas on our homes. We use gas. Gas is a utility, but they do not regulate it. Why? That should be the first thing we regulate in our lives and keep control of, because as you can see what happened, the cost of living went out of bounds just because they went up. And if we had control, and if you look at their profits, they did billions last year, billions. It should have never happened that way. And it should not have been allowed. They gouged us for their own prosperity, and that should not have happened.
Well, you're watching The Greater Wealth. I'm Derek Whittaker, and now moving on to the next investment class, which has really appealed to a lot of the younger generation, and that would be the cryptocurrency. Now, some interesting developments have happened in that space of late. We've had the court case where Ripple, which was, for those who don't know, a particular cryptocurrency, kind of like Bitcoin, was in the courts with the SEC, which is the Australian equivalent of ASIC, which is the regulator as far as the financial markets and investments are concerned. It was a land case type of ruling that basically was taking Ripple to the courts saying, you guys issued an investment without doing the whole regulatory requirements that you do when you have to launch an investment, which is hand out a product disclosure statement, a PDS, as we call it. And there was lots of hoo-ha about that. Ripple's case, it argued back that it wasn't actually an investment. It was more of a, get me if I'm wrong on this, Kimberly, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it was more of a currency and treating it more as a currency, the actual coin itself. And it was made as a open to the public to do so. Long story short, they partially won that case, excuse me, in the retail sector, but to the investment houses, they didn't. Now, recently, another court case has come to light, and that is that there's been an absolute push for big investment firms wanting to have what we call an exchange-traded fund of Bitcoin. The market got very excited about this. Now, for those who don't know what an exchange-traded fund is, it's one of those ones where, well, you can actually trade Bitcoin, so to speak, without actually buying Bitcoin. You can do it through the share market and through a brokerage house. Now, the price topped at 35,000 for the first time since May 22, when this was actually announced, because of the sentiment about it. And they saw it really rising by about 8%. And then later, I heard it would go to 15%. As of now, of course, it's gone even higher. In relation to that, in the last 7 days, over 11%. This is really interesting space, this whole cryptocurrency, because you've got the situation where the banks have wanted to keep the old system in place. It's kind of a Kodak moment. We're happy to collect the films and not innovate. And the market's going, well, we have innovated. We have made currency digital, and the banks haven't wanted to go there and now are scrambling to do that. What's the American view on this, Kimberly? These have been huge court cases to watch from abroad. Is there a lot of talk in your sector about this?
Yes, there is, and has been for many years. And I try to stay away from Bitcoin right now because of the contention between those who do and those who don't. And the banks still control all of our money, as you are aware of. So the issue is a lot of people don't trust it here. We've watched it go up and down, up and down. You know, Bitcoin hasn't been very stable. I think the biggest problem is the government wants to control it and they don't know how. And those of us who don't want to be controlled, I mean, I do like it for this reason. It can't be controlled. And the transaction is so flawless, right? Bitcoin transactions are extremely flawless. They go where they need to go. You get paid. So there are a lot of good and bad, but I think as we see the economy going the way it is, you're going to see a higher interest in Bitcoin.
It's interesting, the whole push becoming the custodian of your own wealth, as it seems, and this is the observation I made, the know your client rules have really changed. You had the Patriot Act come in after September 11, which changed the whole financial industry incredibly. We're now seeing another push of this since COVID. And I've often used the metaphor that when I was a kid, you used to grow up and you used to hear about the shotgun that was taken into the bank and the bank holdups and robberies that would occur. Now we don't hear about that anymore due to the tightening of securities around those organizations and structures and surveillance that goes on. However, I would argue metaphorically, the shotgun is still in the bank. It's only pointed at the customer these days. And I'm seeing the government pushing the organizations, the financial ones, to do their dirty work. Know more about your clients, know where the money's going, because they've extended the credit card as far as spending on COVID and other poor management of funds. And now they've got a cash flow issue and they want to be able to tax every cent they can out of the general population. Well, we want to know where that money is going from and who's behind what particular entity, whether it be a company entity or a trust fund or something. It's just getting ridiculous.
It is. The way that they want to control it, and you used this word earlier, to control, right? They want to control us. And I think being able to utilize some of the Bitcoin is giving you control without them controlling you. And again, I'm torn between two, because I have lived and worked under regulatory standards for years, so I see the plus in it. But I get frustrated, and I stood up for the Bitcoin a couple of years ago when the government tried to come in and shut them down. And, you know, I mean, where's our free enterprise? You know, come on. This is technology. This is where we're heading. If you're afraid of it, come and learn about it. But you can't shut it down. You know, we are a free enterprise country, and they backed off a little bit, but then they decided they wanted to get into it, but they still don't know how. You know, we can't decide whether they're going to work today or not. We went without a House Speaker. So I think, again, this is going to have to be something that people are just going to have to take and do and push. And you're just going to have to push harder when the government comes at you. And, you know, hopefully more cases will be won. I would like to see Bitcoin of some kind take over. It's just,
Really?
It's going to be easier.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really, really fascinating that you say that. Okay, let's dive into that.
Not right now. I'm not ready for it now, but I'd like to see it happen.
You'd like to see Bitcoin more. I mean, let's talk about the downsides of Bitcoin for a moment. And I'll come to you in a second, Travis. One of the issues that the weaknesses of Bitcoin is that if you make a mistake, you're responsible, you wear it. You can't go back to the bank and call them up and say, hey, I sent funds to so-and-so incorrectly. They're like, not our problem, you did it, which makes a lot of people more susceptible to online scams, okay? In terms of, hey, I want to change Bitcoin into another alternative coin. Oh, here's a website that will do that. How do you know that actually, especially if they're offshore, they could actually legitimate in what they do? So that's one of the weaknesses of it, because it is outside the regulation framework. So that's where regulation is helpful in protecting the consumer.
Well, that's what I said. That's why I would like to wait for it, but I like to see it take over. Yes.
Yeah. It's a tricky one. It's a really double-edged sword. You've got to be, if you're delving in it, you've got to know what you're doing, but you've also got to be playing the game and be smart about it. Travis, you want to say something?
Oh, totally disagree with everything that was just said. Bitcoin is the new cash. I'm talking like the cash of the 1980s, 1970s. So let's say you were buying something internationally with cash. If you didn't have a checkbook, you'd actually put cash in an envelope and you took the risk on posting the cash. If it didn't get there, that was your fault. So if you want to interact with someone and you want to make sure you're paying the money to the right person, there's ways you can actually check their addresses on the mobile phones. You tap your phones together and you can guarantee that the money is going to the correct person. It's like when you're buying something off Facebook Marketplace or Gumtree or one of those things. If you want to make sure you're not getting scammed, you meet the person. So if you want to guarantee that you're sending it to the right, literally Bitcoin is the cash of the digital economy. So, and I'm also putting Ethereum into that one as well. There's a few others that can have that stance. So if you want to have a off the record transaction, you take the risk that's associated with cash. That's what happens. Like you get caught out. Sorry, too bad, so sad. That's on you. So with Bitcoin, if you do something that you don't want the government to track and you screw it up, that's on you. Sucking. Too bad. So, but there's one of these big pushes that is already happening. And I don't know if you know about this, but in Western Australia, there's actual companies like building companies that will allow you to buy houses, legit green, own them outright. I think they call it green title, using Bitcoin, coins, Ethereum, all the different crypto markets. So you just negotiate on the rate, then you change it, you tap your phone with this company and off you go. You're co-owner of a house using digital currency. So it's already happening. I think what's going to happen, a lot of these court cases aren't so much to regulate it, it's to give the government time to catch up, because they're not trying to restrict what's happening. They've been grabbed by the throat and dragged along with this, and they're trying to reduce how much embarrassment they're getting by how much the crypto market's absolutely flogging their asses in this. So they're getting destroyed, and they're doing every dirty trick in the book to try and catch up.
And one of the things that the government wants to do is tax. And this is the biggest issue around cryptocurrency. Every time you do a transaction, they call it a capital gains tax event, especially if you're moving it from fiat or into a different alternative coin. And so you can see, again, the attempt to control it. That's the motivation. Hey, we're missing out because we aren't getting tax. They're
not ready for it. They've been absolutely kicked in the balls and they have no idea how to catch up. They're like, let's slap a whole heap of lawsuits down. fines, enforcements, whether they're true or correct or not, it doesn't matter. It's just going to slow down the process. So I personally feel this is just a massive catch-up game by the government. I think this is one of the few cases where society has absolutely nailed the government, and it's golden, it's brilliant, I love it. And yes, I do have a little bit of Ethereum, I do have a little bit of some of the other weird tokens that are now worth absolutely jack shit, because that's a risk I took. My camera's gone out of focus, there we go. So, that was my risk. I did a couple of deals. I used the tokens that I thought might take off, and, sucks to be me, but, I wore it. That's a risk I took, and I've made some money on some, I've lost some money on some, but it's like everything, you've got to assess the risk. Is it in your risk portfolio? Yes, great, go for it. If it's not, then don't do it. The risk is on you.
We're talking about it in two different phases here. So the difference between the crypto is one, some people look at it as an investment. The other view is it's a currency. And that's
I've done it in both ways. I've actually done, because we run a printing company as well, I've actually done printing jobs using an up-and-coming token that was created in Perth. That token's now worth nothing. So, I've dabbled in both sides. So
Kimberly, what's an American perspective of it? Does it lean more towards investment or more in terms of currency?
Both. And, it's been fun watching it, because I know people who bought into miners back in 2006 or 8, a long time ago, that this has been floating around out there. And that's an investment, and they've stuck to it. They still own the equipment and everything. I never understood it. I thought it was the Duke Energy company, because if you burn a lot of energy making Bitcoin, you understand that, right? Like you use up a lot of energy. And so I always thought that this was a utility company game, because that's what they wanted to do. And I wanted to throw up solar power panels and do it, but they won't allow that. So I think they're doing both. One of the things I want to kind of change the way people look at it. Everybody said, oh, it's the dark world, that's where crime is done. And it's not. Actually, they've caught more criminals because of it. Because you can trace every single one of those. Every transaction can be traced if you wanted to. The way you don't trace somebody is cash. And I don't know if this has been happening in your country, but our country, the credit card transactions have cost so much. I know people want to go to Bitcoin, but a lot of people haven't done that yet. So Venmo has become a big thing, and cash. Most of the people I get services from, they want cash only now.
You're watching the Greater Wealth. I'm Derek Whitaker. The thing about the whole ingenious part of cryptocurrency was not actually the coin, in my view, but the blockchain itself. And that's the part which Kim's alluding to here, is how it can authenticate transactions and get rid of a lot of administration costs for businesses and, of course, banks. The downside of this is the banks, centralized banks particularly, have caught on, and we've had the emergence of what we call centralized business digital coins, or CBDCs is a simpler phrase of that. And there's a big doozy of a story where we've talked about this in the past, and that story continues about what is the intent of banks doing this. Now, I've argued that the danger of a CBDC is this. If a government can put a coin in a wallet, it certainly can take it out again. And that means ultimate control. The second part danger of that is they're programmable. So if you reach your allotment of buying too much fuel and oil this year because of your carbon footprint, shame on you, they can stop you at the pump from filling up the tank, or from your eating of chocolate candy bars or whatever it might be that is your sort of thing. They might say you're too much of a health risk to the system and society. And of course, now you're into a credit rating system, or social credit rating system, not only just with your behavior in society, but also linking that with a credit score, which in my humble opinion, I think a credit score is a form of social control. Anyway, we'll put that aside, that argument for now.
Slavery.
What? Sorry?
Slavery.
Slavery, yeah.
Serfdom. Let's be honest with you. If you've got a social credit score, you're a serf.
Yeah.
the government owns you. You're a part of the land. You've got no rights.
Now, there's been an interesting story that comes out. Now, there's a lot of this stuff is often tainted with, hey, conspiracy. I love what Elon Musk said. We are running out of conspiracy theories because a lot of them are proving true. Now, this gentleman here, I've been looking at his background. It's a gentleman called Professor Richard Werner. He's got a huge list of credentials behind him. What's very interesting about him, too, is that he was at one point one of the darlings of the World Economic Forum, a global leader for tomorrow, as they coined him in 2003. And now he's turned whistleblower. I'd like to share with you just some of the stuff he says in terms of what the intent is for the CBDCs and how it's related from his experience with the World Economic Forum. Take a look at what he has to say in this video excerpt.
They have literally delayed their agenda because I think it's so important to them. They've been very careful about the timing, and let's wait a little longer, let's wait a little longer, let's have this crisis first, let's have COVID first, soften them up. But they've delayed because the technology was already ready around 2015 to roll out. Mm. And what people don't mention is, what do these CBDCs actually look like? At the moment, there's a bit of talk about this being phone-based apps. And yes, that is the initial phase. But what was already ready around 2015 is the ultimate goal. What they really want, apparently, I was told by a central banker, is, CBDCs looks like a small grain of rice that they want to put under your skin, which is, in my view, a violation of human dignity. And they realize there is a hurdle. So to get people to accept this, there will be, why suddenly are all the billionaires saying, let's have universal basic income? Because the story is going to be, now we've created this vast unemployment and disruption and crises. Well, we need universal basic income. You will get 2,000 euros into your account every month. But of course, to run this efficiently, we need to use the latest technology. So, you need the CBDC chip implant. But how many people will say, okay, fine, £2,000, 2,000 euros,
a surprising proportion.
That video courtesy of the Sergeant News Network, which we received there. What do you think about that, Kimberly? Your response on that one, initial response.
There's a lot going on. All right. And there's a bigger story there. One of the things I'm afraid of, because I know where Bitcoin evolved from, it came out of somebody from China. China owns most of our banks. When you're talking about somebody controlling us and our own government, he might be right in what he is saying, and that the control is just really big. But what would happen if we all put our money into it, and it was really, all of this was owned by China, and they just take everything we have? And I don't know. What are your thoughts? I mean, this is deep.
My thoughts are this: it is giving absolute control to another body. If you implant, first of all, I feel it's a complete impingement on someone's right of bodily autonomy, right?
I agree.
Insist that the only way to transact with me is that you have a microchip in your right hand or in your forehead. That is completely out. And to then punish someone so they can't buy or sell without having that, well, that's ultimate control. Because, like it or not, they are tracking you through your smartphone as to where you're going, who you're interacting with, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, how do you know? You put on the traffic map. Why does it have a red line that traffic's really bad there? They're just measuring all the mobile phones in that area and saying, hey, there's a blockage here. So they've already got that kind of technology happening. We've been planting microchips in animals for years now. Talk to the farmers, talk to the pet owners. So they've had that. And they've, as this gentleman, this professor argues, the whole PayWave system, I don't know if you've seen that roll out in America recently, where you just roll your credit card or your debit card in front of it. You don't actually have to take out, plug it in, put your PIN number in. They just make it convenient. Or now, of course, you can swipe it with your phone, conditioning to the system. What's that, Kimberly?
It's like a wand.
Yeah, it is. It's conditioning the masses to this kind of behavior. I don't know if you've ever gone through a situation where you've had your bank accounts frozen. I have. And I can tell you, you lose real trust in the banks who build their reputation on safety and security. Well, can you imagine a government in control of the currency and how you can spend your money? It's madness. It's been a fascinating discussion. These and more probably raise more questions for you than answers, and I hope that's the whole intent of this show. The Greater Wealth, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining us.